Greetings. This is Reverend Bob Zanicki. I'm the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. It is Wednesday, October 7th, 2020, and I'm welcoming you to this weekly midweek meditation where we've been discussing about the book of Acts, the first and earliest history that we have of the developing Christian church. So this past Sunday, October 4th, for many of us Protestants, this was World Communion Sunday, and that was started as a recognition back in the early part of the 20th century, actually out of Shadyside Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it was started there with the concern about doing ecumenically what one could do to further strengthen the unity of the Church of Christ, the Church of Jesus Christ in our land and throughout the world. There was a pretty determinative push back at that time, give or take the generations before and after, in terms of calling us as all these multiple denominations within Christianity to work together, to show more unity than we have been showing in the past. And of course, there are multiple reasons for this disunity, social, cultural, theological, territorial, and such. But it was a good thing, and many of us are very grateful for Shadyside Presbyterian Church for developing this event that became annual on the first Sunday of October of each year. And so this past Sunday, we celebrated communion, the Lord's Supper, and also I shared about the beginnings of this movement back in the early 1900s about unity in Christ, because that's certainly been if you read the Gospels, you read Paul's epistles, there's this interest in keeping together this unity in Christ. So I shared some thoughts about that, and I took it beyond just the Christian church, because of with more interfaith dialogue these last several generations, which that is so wonderful, but also the idea of identifiers or identities. And I just briefly read 1 Corinthians chapter 1, the piece where Paul is criticizing the Corinthian fellowship there about being fragmented, that, I'm identifying with this person, I'm identifying with that person, Cephas, Apollos, Christ. And Paul will have none of that. He's talking about unity in Christ. And so that's very important. But secondarily, the message of Christ that I understand and I see through the scriptures, and I also see germinating within the Hebrew scriptures, also the idea that we are all created in the image of God, and that it's important that no matter what denomination, whatever faith tradition, there needs to be a recognition of certain fundamental ideas, beliefs that transcend particularities. And we see those expressed through Jesus Christ as Christians. And so that we need to understand that even though we are different, some different identities, there are certain issues, concerns, laws, if you will, commandments that we need to adhere to universally. And so, my friends, if you missed church on Sunday, I suggest if you would. Oh, and by the way, a good friend, young man, George Lewandowski, has a tremendous voice, wonderful baritone voice. He sang 2 anthems for us, which were truly inspirational. So if you are interested, and I hope you are, why not tune in through YouTube to the First Presbyterian Church of Wilkes-Barre and learn something and enjoy that service. Well, now for several minutes, we'll continue on in the text of the book of Acts of the Apostles, and we'll continue in chapter 18. Last time we met, we finished up with Paul, we were told, set sail for Ephesus. He's been traveling around, he's been up there in the north and going over a little bit to the east, and then he goes over to the west to Macedonia, and now he's traveling to back to Ephesus area. So we pick it up there in verse 22 of chapter 18. And when he, Paul, had landed at Caesarea, and I visited Caesarea 3 times over the 3 trips to Israel. It's right on the Mediterranean Sea, basically, and quite an interesting Roman city. You pick that up, Caesarea, Caesar, okay? But when he had landed at Caesarea, he went up to Jerusalem. Now, the reason they say he went up to Jerusalem, Jerusalem was to the east, but the only way one would go to Jerusalem would be to go up, because it's rather high up in somewhat of a mountainous area. Certainly not like the Rockies, but that's why Jerusalem is where it is throughout antiquity, because you would build a fortification for your protection somewhere high, not certainly down in the valley for people to come at you in terms of aggression from above down to below. So it is going up to Jerusalem, and I can still envision in my mind's eye going up to Jerusalem on 3 different occasions. So it says, and he went up to Jerusalem and greeted the church, the ecclesia. And again, it was a small group. It was growing, okay, but this was the very beginning here, these years of the development of what became known as the Christian church. And then after that, he went down to Antioch. Well, of course, he's up there. Now he's going down, and Antioch would be north of Jerusalem, and so he's traveling there. After spending some time there, he departed and went from place to place through the region of Galatia and Phrygia, and strengthening all the disciples. So he was sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, Christ's life, death, resurrection, and who he was, and not only sharing it among the Jewish folk, his own people, but also reaching out to the Gentiles, as we've been hearing as we've been going through the book of Acts. Then it says here in verse 24, now there came to Ephesus a Jew named Apollos. That name may sound familiar from what I've read just earlier in the last week or two. A native from Alexandria. Now, of course, Alexandria, where's that? That's in northern Egypt. And of course, you hear the word Alexandria. What do you hear within it? Alexander. It was named after Alexander the Great a few couple centuries and a half beforehand, few centuries. So there was a large Jewish presence in Alexandria back at this time. So this is where Apollos came from. And so he was an eloquent man, well versed in the scriptures. And again, the scriptures are the Hebrew scriptures, which, though, would have been, as I've mentioned in the last few weeks, really they would have been from the translation of the Greek, the Septuagint. So they would have been reading the Hebrew scriptures in Greek, kind of like we read the Hebrew scriptures in English for ourselves, okay? He had been instructed in the way. Again, now in my Bible, and probably many others, but in the New Revised Standard Version, the word way, W-A-Y, is capitalized because, again, it is understood that this is probably one of the earliest terms for Christians. At one point, and we've already read about where the word Christian was first used a few chapters back, but the way was kind of accepted parlance in terms of this group of people that became known as Christians. Instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with burning enthusiasm and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. Keep in mind, remember John early on, well, as we find especially in Matthew, Luke, and then, and at the very beginning of Mark, John is baptizing the people in the River Jordan. Okay, and this is the precursor. He is the precursor before Jesus, and Jesus comes to him as we read in the Gospels. Okay, but he knew only the baptism of John. So that's an interesting sentence. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue. Now, again, he was Jewish, but he was of the way. And so just as Paul was doing, didn't just, I'm going to be a Christian, therefore I step away from the synagogue, because it wasn't understood to be that way at that point. Later on, it certainly became that way. So he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained the way of God to him more accurately. So, we all have something, we can always learn something new. I'm hoping maybe these times of our being together, we'll be telling you some things maybe that you didn't know that might help pull things a little better together, more so for your Christian faith, for the way of looking at history and understanding who we are, where we are today. And when he wished to cross over to Achaia, the believers, the followers of the way, people of the way, encouraged him and wrote to the disciples to welcome him. Remember back earlier on in the opening part there, as Paul had his conversion in the chapters 8 or so, 8 and 9. I can't remember exactly right now, but then after those chapters, the disciples, followers of Jesus in Jerusalem, were fearful of Paul. And so it took people to say, look, he's okay. Barnabas, son of encouragement, was one of those main people. So here too, that these disciples wrote to others, communicated, and said, hey, welcome him. Welcome this fella, this Apollos. On his arrival, he greatly helped those who through grace had become believers, for he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures, now the scriptures again are the Hebrew scriptures in Greek, that the Messiah, the anointed one, the Christ, those are all equivalent words, different languages, is Jesus. Keep in mind, there is yet to be a distinct separation between the synagogue and the people of the way, these Christians that were originally primarily, from Judaism, from the Jewish ethnos, those folks that had the holy scriptures of the Hebrew scriptures. So we'll finish that right now and then pick up in chapter 19 next week. But I hope you will join us either live in terms of actually in the sanctuary this coming Sunday, or you will join us through live streaming. And if you're not available to do the live streaming, to join us through the YouTube in terms of the taped videoed service. And I plan on this coming Sunday to share with you something about, I guess maybe we could call them the 10 suggestions. The 10 commandments. They've been around a long time, and they never grow old. And so I thought I would just take some time Sunday morning to repeat the 10 commandments as taken out of the book of Exodus, and share with you some thoughts that bring us up to date too, in terms of that they still are good commandments. They're good ways, laws to live by. My friends, God bless you, and I hope to see you soon, to hear from you, and also if I can ever be of any help to you, please give me a call, please contact me. God bless you. See you soon.